What is up, my brothers and sisters, my agents of respect? It's your boy TreJuanJohnson back with another episode of the No Disrespect But podcast. I am joining you guys from my hotel room in lovely Austin, Texas, on a work trip. I actually just got back from um, a big meeting that went well, and I told you guys it was going to be a late episode tonight. So for those that have an opportunity to listen to this, appreciate you. Um, and I told you I was either going to be in really good mood or a really bad mood. And outside of the Austin traffic, that could have easily put me in a really terrible mood. After my meeting, I got the alert at the latest college football rankings. And, I agree with some of it, obviously what's been going on with the Big Ten. Um, and I think there's um, not necessarily bias, but maybe some overrating of some of the Big Ten teams. But obviously, the discourse the past few days has been, does Alabama get in into the playoff? And I'll talk about that in a second. I kind of want to, give props to the other teams. So just kind of looking at it, their projected top four seeds would be um, Oregon, obviously at one, Texas at two. They think Texas is going to win the SEC. SMU at three, and Boise State out of the G5 Mountain West Conference getting that fourth and final bye. And then obviously you got Arizona State representing the Big 12 as the 12 seed, going up against the 5 seed Penn State. You have, what is that? Ohio State going up against Tennessee. That would be a great matchup. Would love to see those two face off. You got Georgia going up against Indiana, which I think would be a great matchup as well. Two veteran quarterbacks. Um, Georgia's defense is going to be humming, but can Curtis work on that offense and those playmakers make some plays? Obviously, their defense is really talented as well. Two Saban tree guys, and Coach Signetti and obviously Coach Smart over in Georgia. And then you got Alabama versus Notre Dame. Notre Dame hosting. That's my dad's favorite college team, so that'll be fun. But there you have it. And then on the outside looking in, you had Miami, who lost against Syracuse and they got pushed back. Ole Miss, and then you had South Carolina at 14. Um, and here's the thing: I'm not surprised at these rankings. I think everybody created so much discourse about why Alabama wouldn't get the last spot. And guys, let's just be honest with ourselves. Of the three lost teams, they had the better resume. They had the better strength of schedule, had the better strength of record, had more notable wins. And when you go up against a two-loss University of Miami team, they didn't play anybody. And you just could not reward a team going a whole year, the whole season, not playing any ranked teams, not having any ranked wins, losing two games against teams with a above 500 record, more losses than Alabama had, going up against teams above 500. There was no way. I love Cam Ward. I love that offense, how explosive they are. They're the number one offense by far in college football, but it just wasn't enough. The resume didn't stack up. And you can call it SEC bias, you can call it Alabama bias, but here's the reality, guys. This was bound to happen. Yours truly told you so. I hate to be that guy, but you should have listened. Like, you should have listened to me. But you didn't want to understand what I was saying. You kept telling me about parity and about how there'll be more opportunities for Cinderellas, and we're only really getting one. And I had a conversation with one of my friends on Twitter. He was like, "Well, what about teams like SMU and Arizona State? To me, they're in Power Four conferences. You're not a Cinderella if you're a Power Four in a Power Four conference. Like in basketball, if Virginia Tech ends up winning the national championship in basketball, they're not a Cinderella. They're in the freaking ACC, one of the best conferences in college basketball. So why would I take a Power Four conference and champion in football and say, well, yeah, you're a Cinderella? No, Boise State, UNLV, Tulane possibly could have been one. Army could have been one. Like the fact that we will only get one of those opportunities, only one of those teams will make it, is crazy to me in a 12-team playoff. I would have liked to see, Army has one loss. Their only loss is to Notre Dame on the year. Why can't Army, if they win their conference championship game against Tulane, why can't they be a representative in the college football playoff? Along with the Boise State or along with the UNLV, whoever wins the Mountain West Conference between those two teams. I mean, we'll dive into that a little bit later. And what I said, if you guys remember in earlier episodes, was that this was going to be the SEC Invitational featuring the Big Ten. And guess what? Right now, there are 4 Big Ten teams, 4 SEC teams, and everybody else. You mean to tell me 2 conferences take on 67% of the playoff format or playoff slate? That's insane. Imagine what would have happened if Notre Dame lost against USC. They're out, and you're probably backdooring South Carolina or Ole Miss into this. Now you're talking about 5 SEC teams in the playoffs, and 9 of the 12 spots being occupied by 2 conferences. But anyone that could see past what the media was selling in terms of trying to make a dollar, which, hey, it's a business. It is. That's why players are about to start getting paid for real now, because we have just accepted that college football is a business and a conglomerate, and we're just got to approach it that way. But some of you fell for the lies and the misleading that this would open the door for parity and more opportunities for other conferences. Yes, they've had more opportunities to be on national television, more opportunities to be covered in terms of their programs. I agree with that. But when it comes to vying for a national championship, it's going to be the SEC, the Big Ten, and everybody else. There's a chance right now that if Clemson wins the ACC, I'm telling you right now, they're probably going to knock SMU out with 2 losses, with 1 loss in the regular season to a ranked BYU team and 1 loss in the conference championship. And they will be penalized because in their scheduling, they just didn't play anybody. It may be unfortunate, but this was the landscape that we should have seen coming once we expanded it. And if we expanded to 16 teams, we're going to have the same thing. It just is what it is. But what gets me is that Alabama wasn't the only team vying for this last playoff spot, right? We had Miami, we had Ole Miss, we had South Carolina, but everybody wanted to talk about why Alabama shouldn't get in. And here's the thing. You talked about why they shouldn't get in so much. You had to talk about the resume. And the committee started seeing the resume and they said, well, more ranked wins, better strength of schedule, better strength of record, head-to-head components. This is the team that we got to put in. Because instead of arguing why Bama shouldn't get in, they should have been arguing why South Carolina should get in. And just say South Carolina should get in because of this. But instead, you would say South Carolina should get in over Bama because of this. Ole Miss should get in over Bama because of this. Miami should get in over Bama because of this. You see see the one constant? See the common denominator here? You mentioned one team. In your case for 3 other teams to get that last playoff spot, you had to keep comparing them to one team, although there were 4 teams vying for it. But there was one common denominator in the conversation. That right there lets you know this is a business. And Bama sells. The product sells itself. And here's the thing. I don't believe that a 3-loss team should be in the college football playoff. That's just the truth of the matter. I don't believe a 3-loss team should be in. But when you made it 4, or when you went away from being 4, you didn't even try to start at 8, you went straight to 12. You opened the door for this. You opened Pandora's box, and we can't go back. And if we go up to 16 in a couple years, we're not going to be talking about 4 and 5 loss teams. Because I assume that the scheduling aspect will be fixed by then. But are you going to penalize maybe a Georgia team that loses 4 games in a year? They probably play LSU, Alabama, Texas A&M, whatever it may be. Will you penalize a 5-loss Michigan maybe in these scenarios? Will you continue to only hold one spot for group of five conference champions? In my heart of hearts, especially if we want to talk about everybody getting a fair shake, well, and we want to talk about the comparison with the basketball tournament, well, give the conference, all the conference champions a bid. Sun Belt, American, Conference USA. Let's just give everybody a bid. You win the conference championship, you get a chance to be in the college football playoff, and we go from there. That's how the the men's and women's basketball tournament has created Cinderella opportunities because they've given multiple teams an opportunity from smaller conferences. And that's doing wonders for them because now they're on the national stage. They're getting paid to be there. They win some games. They're getting more and more revenue for their respective institutions. And obviously, we know the uptick in terms of enrollment because now they're getting national and international notoriety. And when they do really well, like Florida Gulf Coast did a few years ago, you see an uptick in enrollment numbers. And that has just been tremendous for the overall growth of the university and the athletic programs. So I mean, hell, we really want to give parity, we really want to give opportunity. Let's do something along those formats. But as long as you want to keep this thing at 12, like it's Bama this year, it'll be Georgia the next, Texas, whatever, it'll be Ohio State, uh, or whoever it is. We're going to continue to have teams within those two conferences that are battling for that last spot. And I'm here to tell you that they're going to get the benefit of the doubt more than the teams in the ACC, more than teams in the Big 12, more than teams in the in the G5. That's just the truth of the matter, guys. And you have to learn to accept it. I've accepted it because I saw it coming all along. A lot of people did. We were making jokes about, man, wait till a 3 or 4 loss team has an opportunity. Early in the year, we were thinking it might be Georgia because we were talking about what if Georgia loses to Ole Miss and they have 3 losses? There's an opportunity that we can still see them getting in the playoffs. They were the team we were talking about then. It just so happens to be Bama, and now everybody wants to get their panties in a bunch and think it's just solely Bama bias or solely SEC conference bias. There's a degree to that. There's a degree of bias to the Big Ten, but also at the same time, more times than not, they're going to play. They're going to play the games they have to play. And your conferences have to step up because if the ACC can't start to have the best of their best play against one another, if the Big 12 can't do that and have a prominent champion, what's going to happen is some of your better teams in those conferences are going to say, hell, I have a better chance of jumping to the SEC. I have a better chance of jumping to the Big Ten. And hell, I might only win maybe 3 or 4 games, but I have a much better shot with as a 3 or 4 loss team in the SEC or Big Ten than I do as a two loss team in the ACC or Big 12. That's where we are now, folks. And I told y'all, like I was like the guy was arguing me saying, Bama's eliminated, Bama's eliminated. I was like, no, they're not. They need help. They needed help, sure. Thanks, South Carolina, for beating Clemson. Thanks, Syracuse, for beating Miami, because that was the big one right there. So we knew they were going to need help, and they got the help that they needed. And they got in. When it became a conversation between 4 teams, 3 of which had 3 losses, and one had 2 losses, but played in a crappy conference with a crappy schedule. You should have knew what was going to happen. But y'all can get your bars off. Y'all gonna be mad at Alabama and say it's about them. You're gonna be rooting against them. And look, if all things stay the same, Alabama goes up to South Bend, and I'll take them against Notre Dame. I mean, I take that defense and going up against a quarterback that has some turnover issues. Hell, Bama has some turnover issues as well. But I think you can run the ball effectively on Notre Dame. Um, So I'd like to see that matchup. I think Alabama gets there, and guess what? Who would they play in the second round? SMU, going up against an explosive offense. Um, a team that's been blowing guys off, blowing teams off the field, but also hasn't necessarily been tested. They didn't have to play Clemson this year. They didn't have to play Miami this year. They played Florida State in the down year. And you take that, and then now they possibly beat SMU, and now they're in the semifinal for the second year in a row. We'll see. I'm interested. I'm intrigued. I think there's going to be uh, some changes there, because I think some teams, obviously we have conference championships, and I actually want to segue into that because I think conference championship is going to dictate a lot of these playoff brackets, and these playoff seedings. Um, for instance, and I want to start with the Big 12. We got Arizona State going up against Iowa State. Arizona State's going to be without their best offensive playmaker at wide receiver, going up against a hot Iowa State team, a team that most projected to win the conference this year. I know Josh Pate did. Shout out to him. He was really high on the Cyclones going into the year, and they have a chance. They won games down the stretch, got themselves into the Big 12 title game. They're a Big 12, elder statesman in a way. Some member of the old guard, while Arizona State coming over from the Pac-12 with an opportunity. And I love Ken Dillingham and what he's done with that team. Um, but I'll tell you, my predictions for that, I think Iowa State wins that game. I think they have enough firepower on both sides of the ball, and I think Iowa State will be the Big 12 champs. I think they still end up with the 12 seed. I think they'll be the lowest ranked conference champion. So that's where I am with that. I have Iowa State winning instead of Arizona State. Let's go Big 10. Penn State, I, I mean, I never thought it would happen. They made it to the conference championship game, albeit we get it. Division, they don't exist anymore, so they don't have to play Ohio State and Michigan in the same year. Their only loss this year was to Ohio State at home. Um, had a 10-point lead, if I'm not mistaken, and kind of squandered that. Ended up losing the game. Probably just ruined their shot. I think they had opportunities to win the game, but didn't do it. But other than that game, they've been pretty good this season. Um, but they're going to be going up against Oregon, who's another kind of transplant coming over from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. And Penn State, to me, just hasn't been a big time player in big time games. Albeit it was usually against Ohio State and Michigan that we measured them up against. But I just don't think they can beat Oregon either. I think Oregon is now one of the top teams. So I think when Oregon joined the conference, it automatically pushed Penn State to fourth place. And granted, guess what? They're in the conference championship, but I mean, you only had to play Ohio State. What if you had to play Oregon in the regular season? We saw what Michigan was able to do and run the table against Ohio State. So either way, I still think Oregon wins. And so the bracket has that correctly. I think Oregon beats Penn State. Um, and I don't think it's necessarily pretty either. I think Oregon kind of has their way a little bit with Penn State. I just trust their offense, I trust their defense, I trust their trenches, and I trust their coaching a lot better than I do Penn State. So I would have Oregon winning the Big Ten championship game in their inaugural year or their first year in the conference, which is crazy to think. I thought it would be to Ohio State, but they lose to Michigan, basically losing their spot in the Big Ten championship game. And they were the only team that I thought in the Big Ten that could beat Oregon. So there you have it. Oregon as your Big Ten champions. Um, ACC title game, again, another transplant, SMU, um, going up against Clemson. And you guys know early in the season, I had Clemson as my conference champion. But they've been hot and cold. And I just can't trust Cade Klubnik and that offense to be consistent. And SMU has been the motto of consistency. Have they played a lot of good teams? No, they haven't, but they've played well in every game. Their only losses to BYU, who probably should be in the Big 12 championship game, but had a couple tough losses that really knocked them out. I think SMU beats Clemson. So I think we have that right here. with them as the 3 seed in the college football playoff. I just think SMU gets it done. Then let's go to SEC. We got Texas and UGA. Now, based on these projections, they have Texas beating UGA. I actually think UGA is going to win that game. And sorry, I'm in Austin, but hopefully I'm not too loud. But I think UGA is just a better team. They showed that when they came down to Austin, and you're giving Kirby Smart more time to prepare for you. Like I always say, if you don't have that script A on the side of your helmet, he's likely not going to lose to you in a big game that has stakes. Um, and I just see Kirby Smart and his dogs being ready for war. And obviously with Boise State and UNLV, that's a tough one because I really want Aston. I want to see Aston Genty on this stage. But I also think UNLV is a really good team. And they were a team that we were projecting to be in this spot as well. But I'm gonna stick with Boise State mainly because, man, I'm just a big fan of Aston Genty, and I want to see him. I want to see what he can do against some of this top competition, and go from there. But so I think the only thing I would have switched up is that I would have, um, I guess, Texas where Georgia is. I would have Georgia as my 2 seed, um, and I'd probably have um, Penn State as my 7. Like if that happens, because they lose, I have Penn State as my 7, and Texas as my 5, maybe. But um, but those are just kind of the conference championship stakes that I have right now. I don't really want to touch on the other ones. Like obviously, I think Tulane is going to be Army, but I really wish um, that conference championship game between Tulane and Army was for another playoff spot. But unfortunately, that's not the case because we've been lied to as fan bases about what the 12-team playoff is going to bring and the opportunities that it was going to bring in terms of vying for a national championship. So maybe in a couple years when we go to 16, we can maybe hope and pray that there are 2 G5 conference champion representatives. And hell, let's say a 2 undefeated G5 teams are going at it in each of their respective conference championships. You know, can we see 3? Can we see a conference champion and a conference championship loser if they win it undefeated and lost? And depending on what their schedule look like. So I'm just see what that is. But let's say for sake of discussion, those are just my predictions. But let's say for sake of discussion, we end the year with this bracket that we have right now. This bracket that we have right now. Um, I want to give you what I think would happen in each of these scenarios. Um, as it looks, the winner of Arizona State and Penn State will play Boise State. I think Penn State would win that game. And I think Penn State would beat Boise State. No, actually, I lied. I think if Penn State went against Boise State, I think Boise State would win and make it to a semifinal. So that's one semifinal matchup. Tennessee and Ohio State would play. The winner of that game would play Oregon. I think Tennessee will win that game, and I think that Oregon would beat Tennessee. So that would set up a rematch between Boise State and Oregon in the semifinals. Alabama Notre Dame winner would play SMU. Obviously, I would take Alabama, and I would take Alabama to beat SMU to get to a semifinal, and I would take Georgia to beat Indiana, would face off with Texas, and I honestly would take Georgia to beat Texas a third time. But I guess in this case scenario, it would be for a second time because based on this, they're assuming that Texas is going to win. So I would have Georgia getting that win there, and that would set up Alabama and Georgia in the um, semifinal, and Boise State and Oregon in the semifinal. I'll take Oregon in a rout against Boise State. Obviously, they played them early in the year. Didn't even have their whole offensive line rotation. Dylan Gabriel was still kind of getting the offense together. They were getting their defensive rotations together. I think Oregon wins that in the rout. I think Alabama and Georgia, they have another thriller, but not the way it was before, where Alabama popped out to a 28-0 lead, blew the lead, came back, scored a touchdown, got a late game-sealing interception. I think it's one of those things where it's kind of close to the very end, and Alabama pulls away. And I think you have Alabama as the 11th seed playing against the number one overall seed, Oregon. And we know Coach DeBoer's track record against Dan Lanning in Oregon. And I think he gets him again. And I think you see an 11 seed win the national championship. And now we got to hear about the discourse about how you guys let Alabama sneak in. It was the SEC bias, and you gave them the easiest bracket, and they ran the table, and blah 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 blah. But this is our future, guys. Disrespect, but you should have listened. You should have listened from the beginning. But we are where we are, and we gotta accept where we are. I'm looking forward to conference championship weekend because there are a lot of implications. Just to see what happens if Clemson beats SMU, and what do they do with the Mustangs? Do they keep them in the playoff, or do they say, you know what, you had an opportunity against two ranked teams, you didn't do well against them, you got two losses, even though you made it to the conference championship? Because we've seen conference championship losers get kicked out of the playoff. We saw it last year in the 4 team. We saw Georgia, who had been undefeated all year, had won 26 straight games, regular season games, had been the 2 time national defending champions. They got penalized for losing one game by what, 4 points against Alabama or something like that in the SEC championship game because their schedule just wasn't good that year. And they had a lot of close calls that year. So it is what it is. But we're gonna get this posted. Looking forward to hearing everybody's comments about the college football playoff. Of course, I know y'all gonna be moaning and complaining about Bama. I get it. We get it every year. It's fine. Y'all know who Daddy is. Y'all know who the standard is. Just get used to it. But if we were at a 14 playoff, or if we brought BCS ranking, well, actually, we brought the BCS rankings, Alabama would still be in the playoff. But we had a 14 playoff. Guess what? We wouldn't even have to worry about this. Alabama would be out. Ohio State would be out. Miami would be out. Like, we'd be fine. Clemson would be out. Like, we'd be okay. But we're here now. It is what it is. Accept it. It's our reality. Anyways, if there's anything I said that offended anybody, guess what? It's a good thing. It's an opportunity for me to learn. It's an opportunity for you to teach me. All I ask is that you keep it respectful. Peace.